It's my pleasure to welcome you to the KeyBank Speaker Series. We were just having a lot of fun here, talking and catching up. My name is Marcia Gordon, and I'm the President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. Normally, we're at Abigail Kirsch in their beautiful dining room overlooking the Hudson, drinking coffee. I don't know. I think today we're probably all a little bit happy to be doing this virtually from our offices, whether your office or your home office being warm. So welcome everybody. It's a great honor. Our relationship with KeyBank and this KeyBank Speaker Series goes back probably 18 years, where we have been able to bring to our membership leaders that move our county, our state, our country forward. And it's my pleasure now to introduce John Manginelli, the president of the Hudson Valley Metro New York Market and Northeast Regional Executive from KeyBank Real Estate Capital. John?
Thank you, Marcia. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words in this wonderful event. As Marcia mentioned, I'm John Manginelli, Market President for KeyBank's Hudson Valley and Metro New York markets. While I assumed the market leadership role in November, I've been with Key for 20 years, continuing to lead its real estate capital business in the Northeast. So I'm very familiar with Key's longtime relationship with the Business Council of Westchester and the valuable support it provides to the Westchester business community. A strong local economy is central to the health and vitality of our community, and Key is strongly committed to the businesses we serve. To that end, I'm pleased to work more closely with the council in my new role, along with my colleague, Joe Markey, who sits on the Business Council's board, and I look forward to continuing our valued relationship. As we start the new year, Marcia and her team are once again bringing together local legislators with the business community they represent for meaningful dialogue, and KeyBank is pleased to be able to help make that happen. I want to very much congratulate U.S. Congressman Jamaal Bowman on his recent appointment, and I very much look forward to hearing about his priorities and plans for 2021. I also look forward to hearing from Congressman Mondare Jones next week, February 4th, when the Business Council and KeyBank present the second half of the program. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in and I hope you find this information enjoyable. We very much appreciate it. And I'll turn it back over to you, Marcia.
Thank you, John. And thank you for everything that KeyBank has done. You know, one of the very valuable lessons that we've learned during this pandemic is that there is no time that's been more important for businesses, especially small businesses, to have an excellent relationship with their bank and their banker. And KeyBank has been there. We've noticed it. We talk about it and we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, John. Before I move this forward, I do want to draw attention to next Friday's very, very important conference that the Business Council of Westchester has been working on and preparing for. It's entitled Driving Diversity and Inclusion, Perspectives, Practices, and Opportunities. And this has come because our board of directors has recognized that diversity, inclusion, and equity are fundamental building blocks to business success and to community success. And so we have gathered a wide variety of speakers, of thought leaders, of practitioners in the area of diversity and inclusion. We're proud also that KeyBank, as well as many others, are sponsoring that conference, and we do encourage you to tune in on February 5th. I want to recognize our chairman of the board, Heidi Davidson from Galvanize Worldwide, as well as our vice chair for governmental affairs, George Lentz from Nicholas & Lentz. And it's my pleasure to turn this over now to my colleague, John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Business Council of Westchester. John?
Thank you, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning, and a special thank you to Congressman Bowman for being with us as well. As the county's largest business membership organization focusing on economic development and advocacy, it is imperative that one of our missions continues to be to make sure that our members are connected to our elected officials on all levels of government. And the BCW at times through our different advocacy work, and again, I want to recognize George Lentz as the chair of our Government Action Council, Andra Horsch, who is our Vice President of State Government Affairs, John Boltz, who assists us also on state affairs. Our mission is to make sure that our members have a voice, as well as having an understanding of what's happening on all levels of government, especially during this pandemic. We have a changing political landscape in the country and in New York. And in Westchester County, it is very rare where a county elects not one, but two new members of Congress in the same year. And so we are very fortunate to have Congressman Bowman here today to meet with us. We will be hearing from the Congressman in a minute after I read you his bio. I encourage everyone to please put your questions in the chat room. We will be taking questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we will try to get to as many as possible because we are mindful of the Congressman's busy schedule. But again, please put your questions in the chat room so that we can have them ready to go during that portion of the session. It is very, Congressman and I were talking, it's been an incredible first 3 weeks for the Congressman and his fellow freshman members. Not only were they sworn in, but they had to vote on impeachment, they had to vote on certifying an election, and they had to live through probably one of the most horrific things this country has ever had to live through, which was an insurrection at our United States Capitol. So in those first 3 weeks, he's probably put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears already. But Congressman, thank you for being here, and I'd like our members to learn a little bit more about you. Congressman Bowman is an educator and an advocate who represents New York's 16th Congressional District. Congressman Bowman grew up in New York City, spending his early years in public housing and rent control departments. He was raised by his mother, who supported them with her post office worker's salary. As a working class Black man who has lived and worked in New York's 16th Congressional District for decades, Congressman Bowman's personal experiences are tied closely to those of the constituents he serves. The Congressman ran on a progressive agenda that prioritized bold, transformative policy and racial and economic justice for all. The Congressman has been a passionate educator for more than 20 years and is committing to ensuring that all children are able to unlock their brilliance and achieve fulfillment. After graduating from the University of New Haven, Congressman Bowman began his education career as a crisis intervention teacher in a Bronx public school that primarily served students of color. As a teacher, he saw firsthand the failures of an unfunded education system which focuses on standardized tests over children's well-being. The Congressman went on to earn a master's degree in guidance counseling from Mercy College and a doctorate in education from Manhattanville College. In 2009, the Congressman founded and served as principal of the award-winning Cornerstone Academy for Social Action, CASA, in the Northeast Bronx corner of New York's 16th Congressional District. CASA is an innovative public school that serves as a central hub for learning and supportive programming within the Baychester community. CASA has been recognized for its student achievement, school leadership, and supportive learning environment. Through his work as principal, Congressman Bowman has seen firsthand how low-income families and families of color are locked out of the opportunities needed to thrive. In response, the Congressman has been a regional and statewide advocate for policies that de-emphasize standardized test results in schools and promote trauma-informed programming. As a member of the Childhood Blue Ribbon Committee in New York State, Congressman Bowman developed statewide early childhood learning standards to ensure all pre-K students were receiving the education they needed in advance of kindergarten. Congressman Bowman lives in Yonkers with his wife and children, and just this week, Westchester Magazine recognized the Congressman as one of the 12 leading Black individuals in Westchester County. Congressman Bowman, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for saying all those nice things about me. I really appreciate that, John. I want to start by just sending love and light to everyone on the call. You know, we all have been dealing with a tremendous trauma collectively over the last year because of this pandemic that seems to only be getting worse with recent mutations. So I just want to send love and light to you all and and wish and pray for your health and your safety and that of your families as well. It's such an honor to be here to speak about economic development in our district. You know, I've lived in this district for almost a decade, and I've worked in it as a middle school principal for over a decade. So serving children in the Northeast Bronx gave me a front row seat to some of the things they're dealing with from an economic development perspective, but also from a social and emotional perspective. Living in Yonkers, I would often commute throughout the district for a variety of reasons. We often shop in Larchmont Mamaroneck at the supermarket there. We also shop at the Barnes & Noble in Bronxville, and we travel through Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, Yonkers quite often as we engage with the district, Riverdale as well. And what you notice quite starkly is some of the economic disparities that exist within our district. If we were a nation, we would have the 8th worst economic inequality in the world. We have some of the highest real estate values and tremendous wealth in certain areas. And in other areas, we have kids and families struggling with poverty. In pockets of the district, as I'm sure some of you know, we have not only poverty rates as high as 30% in places like Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle, but we also have people struggling with severe rent burdens as well. We have about over 40% of the district who are rent burdened, and over 30% of the district who are severely rent burdened. So there's obviously a lot of work to do, not just in our district, but across the country. And I'm happy that we have a new president, and that new president is speaking about racial justice and racial equity in a very real way, and seems to be ready to push Congress to pass policy that invests in communities that have been historically underserved, particularly now as we deal with COVID. I believe that small business is the lifeblood of our country, and we need to invest there a lot more than we invest in the large corporations who continue to just reinvest in themselves and get tax breaks from the federal government without giving back to the working people. So I believe we have to have a focus on small business overall, but particularly as we respond to this pandemic, because there have been some reports that 45% of small businesses will not be returning. So the federal government has to do a lot more there to make sure we invest in our small businesses. Also, as one of the wealthiest nations in the history of the world, we should not have this level of wealth inequality, you know, and this is by design. These are policies, federal policies in a lot of ways, that have been put in place over a series of decades that continue to benefit Wall Street and the wealthy elite, and forget about Main Street and forget about the working class people. Trickle down economics has not worked. Even prior to the pandemic, trickle down economics has left way too many families struggling simply to survive. You know, when you're unemployed or underemployed, and when you're severely rent burdened and you have other costs like childcare and healthcare and education, you know, you can barely put food on the table. And we have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in this district and throughout the county that need a lot more support. So I believe in my fight in Washington is going to be about, you know, how do we make sure every single person in this country who is ready, willing, and able to work is able to find a job paying a prevailing wage, is able to have access to universal health care and live in dignified housing. You know, if you're ready, willing, and able to work, and you work full-time and overtime, you should be compensated for that. You should be able to afford your bills, and you should be able to put some money on the side. That's the fight, that's the mission. Part of that fight and mission is a federal jobs guarantee to make sure the federal government provides more opportunities for people to work who are ready, willing, and able to work. It also involves tax reform to make sure the wealthy among us are contributing their fair share to our democracy, because a democracy cannot survive when we have this level of economic inequality and wealth inequality. So it definitely involves ensuring that the wealthy among us pay their fair share to contribute to our democracy. Because the bottom line is, when we all do better, we all do better. All of the issues that we care about and we worry about, issues involving crime, issues involving education, issues involving development, we have segments of our district that we've never really invested in, and for a variety of reasons, whether it's been reputation, lack of knowledge, lack of interest. We need to begin investing more in areas that have been historically neglected. As many of you on this call may know, historically, because of policies like redlining, the communities we have of concentrated poverty were created by design. They don't just exist because there are lazy people living in those communities who don't want to work. That's not true. In these communities that have been forced to live in ghettos, quite frankly, those communities have been disinvested in for a series of decades, and jobs were taken from those communities and sent overseas and sent to other areas, and many people were left with nothing. So how might we reinvest in those communities to help build the economic infrastructure in those communities so that people can live there with dignity and people can begin to thrive? So I encourage the Economic Business Council to focus a bit more on areas like Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and New Rochelle in particular. What I would share is there is untapped potential in these areas. I've worked with children in public schools for over 20 years, and I've seen brilliant children come through my school buildings that I've worked in, but they don't have a community of resources, and they don't have knowledge of what opportunities are out there. So let's focus on investment, job development programming. Let's have some of our Fortune 500 companies and other companies that are very successful in Westchester look to these areas for employment opportunities for the people who live there. Let's bring a new education curriculum into some of our high schools in the district, in those areas, so that kids in those areas know the options when they get out of high school. Sometimes, kids believe it's college or bust, but it's not always college or bust, and it's not always a 4-year college or bust. There are 2-year college opportunities. There are technical training opportunities. There are entrepreneurial opportunities. All of these, any opportunity that's available, the kids in our highest need communities, in our high schools, in our community colleges, they need to be made aware of them. So for me, as I used to drive through the district from the Bronx, I would often drive through Mount Vernon and New Rochelle and Yonkers, and then compare it to Bronxville and Scarsdale and Rye and other areas. And we should be ashamed because we should be doing a lot more as a country for the areas that have been historically neglected. So I support a federal jobs guarantee. I support the federal government investing more in communities that have been historically underserved, because when you invest on the front end, you get a lot more on the back end. So whether we invest in early childhood education, universal child care, education overall, job development in certain areas, those individuals will produce more for the economy and for their community once we invest in them. We just haven't invested as a federal government in certain communities, but we've invested in other communities, and that's where the inequities and disparities have been. I support, as I mentioned, the wealthy paying their fair share, not just on the federal level, but on the state, county, and city level as well, to contribute to the development of everyone, because when we all do better, we all do better. So I'm looking forward to working with you, looking forward to learning along with you and from you. And, this is not the time, in my opinion, for incrementalism. There are brilliant people throughout the district who are untapped potential. And we have developing economies in the district that we have not supported as of yet. So let's figure out a way, to get the ball rolling and to bring excitement to the district around economic development, around affordable housing, around job training and opportunities, around a prevailing and livable wage, so that everyone in the district can not just survive, but thrive. And I look forward to doing that work with you for however long I'm in office. So thank you.
Congressman, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Congressman. First off, could you just also let us know what committees? I know the committee assignments have just been given. Can you let us know what committees you're on?
Absolutely. So I'm on the Education and Labor Committee, obviously because of my education background, really excited about that, but also the labor piece is also very critical. So Education and Labor is one committee, and Science and Tech is another committee. And thank you for asking the question, because I failed to mention this. Science and Tech, I feel, provides a great opportunity for economic development in our district. What might that look like if we were to take a research and development, science, space, and technology perspective when it comes to economic development in our district? What would that look like? Would love to talk with you about that as well.
That's great. Thank you very much. And just on one point that you raised, which is so important, and that's our urban centers like Mount Vernon and Yonkers and Peekskill and others throughout the county. We're very proud at the Business Council of Westchester to have been a daily participant in helping in those areas. Marcia Gordon not only served on the Mayor Sean Patterson Howard's transition team, but has continued to be very active and supportive of her. And some of our members like McQuestern we're seeing the wonderful work that they're doing in the development world in Mount Vernon. So we are going to certainly be there with you and continue to be there, throughout the course of not just this pandemic, but to bring economic development back to all those areas. So thank you for mentioning that. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to be mindful of time. I will be the bad guy, not the congressman. So if we do not get to your question, it is not his fault. You can yell at me all you want. Congressman, New York State is facing a $15 billion deficit. The governor last week released his budget, and for those of us who have been around Albany a long time, it was really the first time we heard a governor actually talk about two different budget scenarios because of the fact that he doesn't know what the state is going to be receiving in terms of aid from DC. He talked about the fact that he has two options. Option one is getting $15 billion from Washington. Option two is what happens if we only get $6 billion from Washington. And obviously that pot of money is coming from President Biden's America Rescue Plan, which is right now a proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus package, and $350 billion of that is earmarked for state and local governments. I guess the first question, I'm trying to summarize this from a bunch of questions that came out. What are you hearing? What is the New York congressional delegation talking about in terms of the relief that they know New York State has to receive? And what do you see as the roadmap for the president getting his relief plan passed?
So the roadmap is going to include moving Republicans in the direction that we need them to go to ensure that cities and states receive the funding that they require, that we require in order to survive. So what stops a lot of this from happening are, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who pride themselves on austerity budgets and pride themselves on, not investing into these states at the levels that we need to. So, Republicans across the country need to be lobbied and pushed in support of the Biden plan. Also, even some of my Democrat colleagues who are all about, fiscal responsibility also need to be pushed as well. But applying pressure both publicly and privately is going to be key there. Our caucus, our delegation here in New York, we've been focused a lot on COVID lately. So just getting vaccines, putting in the infrastructure, getting people vaccinated. We've spoken more on that than the economic piece, but I'm sure it's going to come up in the next meeting or two that we have. But also, I think here the state can do a bit more. So I agree with the governor in terms of, federal government stepping in and providing the resources needed. But also, as I mentioned during my talk, ensuring that, the wealthy are contributing statewide to the overall pot so that we can get ourselves out of this budget and move the state forward for sure.
Obviously, and you've seen it firsthand, and every congressional district has seen it. So many different industries have really been crushed due to the pandemic. Everything from retail to the hospitality sector. Displaced workers now are going to be looking to get back on their feet and might need to be retrained in different areas. So workforce development obviously is going to be something that everyone is going to have to be focusing on. Can you share with us a little bit about your thoughts on not just workforce development, but also really what industries you think Congress and Washington really should be focusing on to help?
Yeah, so we're focused on a couple of industries. One, the energy and environmental industry. We're trying to put forth a federal jobs guarantee and a Green New Deal to get people to work in the clean, green, renewable energy industry. So that's going to be one huge area of focus. If you think back to the New Deal and the Works Progress Administration, we're in that sort of time right now. So we believe a Green New Deal focused on clean, green, renewable energy is going to be an area of focus. And that's going to be part of a big infrastructure bill that's going to be coming out of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that's going to focus on these areas. And it's a commitment of President Biden's as well. So that's manufacturing, that's energy, that's environment, that's construction, that's all of the above. So that's going to be great. Also healthcare in terms of the care economy overall. So we're talking about home health aides, early childhood providers, more nurses and more teachers to close the gaps that have developed over the last year because of the pandemic. That's another area of focus as well. And not just in terms of getting more people into those positions, but also making sure they're able to unionize and organize and earn a prevailing wage as well. Because right now, too many people in those industries, some of them struggle to make minimum wage here and across the country. But the areas of energy, environment, as well as the care economy are two big areas we're going to be focused on.
Thank you. Here's a question from the audience. Yesterday, you and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez sent a letter to Treasury and the Housing Urban Development Agency urging them to relax some of the more stringent requirements and burdensome hoops that tenants need to jump through to get emergency rent assistance. Thank you for doing this. These have been huge problems with getting rental assistance aid to tenants and small landlords who really need it and helped contribute to New York's spending less than half of the rental assistance monies that have already been allocated in 2020. How can we help you make this case? And with so much additional rental assistance passed at the end of 2020, how do we remove barriers so this emergency aid can go quickly to our neighbors who need it?
Yeah. So continue to lobby and communicate with your elected officials, both locally and nationally. If you know people in other states, lobby representatives in those states to support this initiative as well, because we're trying to bring this to, we want this to be a federal sort of initiative in terms of how we respond to COVID. So we're pushing for $2,000 a month for anyone who has struggled with employment. We're pushing for $600 per week for anyone who's struggling with unemployment. We're also pushing for the cancellation of rent and mom and pop mortgages to make sure people are able to stay in their homes. So that's the goal. You know, we want people to stay in their homes. We want bills to be paid. We want food on the table, and we want people to remain safe. So it's a time for the federal government to step in and for people to have easier access to these services. So lobby people across the country, but also, let me say this one point, also lobby Democratic leadership in the House, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Whip Clyburn, and Hakeem Jeffries as well.
And just staying on this point for a second, I mean, the rental assistance is important, but the point that was made in the question is one that I see sometimes does get overlooked, is the fact that some landlords who do everything the right way also need that assistance. So you're looking for some balance.
Well, yes, that's why I said the cancellation of mom and pop mortgages, because those are the landlords that we're talking about. We're not talking about the giant landlords. We're talking about landlords who may have one or two tenants who need the support as well. So yes, absolutely.
This week, Congressman, our board of directors, we have quarterly meetings, and we usually, under our board chair, Heidi Davidson, break out into working sessions. And knowing the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that Westchester County finds himself in a unique position of having two new members of Congress, we wanted to come up and really discuss some of the priorities that obviously will be in our legislative agenda and issues that our members who are employers are hearing from their employees. And there are two that I'd love you to drill down a little more on, because they play such a pivotal role in economic development and the future of economic development in Westchester County. One is affordable housing, and the second is childcare. And both of them, I think, for us working with the Child Care Council of Westchester, we were seeing more and more how childcare is really a pivotal issue for employees who have to deal with this on a daily basis. And employers now who need to play a more active role. And obviously affordable housing is something that is obviously a huge challenge, but also needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be fighting for universal child care across the country. So universal, free at the point of delivery, and exceptional, or at the very least, very affordable child care. Again, as I mentioned earlier, people are underemployed, not earning enough money to survive, and childcare has just become a huge cost. So we're responding to that and working to respond to that at the federal level. And that work was being done prior to me getting there. People like Rosa DeLauro and Catherine Clark have been working on this. With Trump in the White House, nothing was moving, but we believe there's going to be some movement in that area now. So we're looking forward to that. And affordable housing, I'm the product of affordable housing. I lived in rent stabilized apartments my half of my childhood, and it allowed me to go to school and my mom to work in a middle class community that was safe, and it helped me to develop overall. So we're fighting. We've been fighting for rent stabilization at no more than 30% of a person's income. I've heard some people who are looking to fight for the same stabilization at 20% of income. But the bottom line is, in this district, particularly in the areas I mentioned before, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and New Rochelle, people are paying well over 30%, well over 50% in some cases. So we have, Ilhan Omar has some policy. I'm going to be coming out with some policy as well at the federal level to deal with both of these issues, but particularly the affordable housing one.
Thank you. We have another question from one of the members of the audience. As a small business owner, my big issue is healthcare and retirement planning for my employees. I also think it is the easiest way to address a lot of the inequality that you've already mentioned this morning. Everyone should have healthcare, retirement support beyond Social Security. I cannot afford to offer it, and it makes it difficult to attract the best talent. What are some of your thoughts for small business owners who fall in that category?
Well, I believe we need universal healthcare system, single payer healthcare system that untethers healthcare from the employer's responsibility. That would allow the employer to have the resources needed to provide a great retirement package for their employees. So that's why I support Medicare for All. Now, Medicare for All is not traditional Medicare. It expands what Medicare provides, from long-term care to optical to dental. It's, the so-called government option, but it's something that's powerful and could be very helpful to small businesses across the country and employers across the country. So universal health care is a major answer to that question.
Just to follow up on another thing on healthcare, can Congressman Bowman share his thoughts on force the vote? In what way would a reimagined healthcare financing system impact economic development?
So if we can get to Medicare for All, we can lift millions out of poverty, because we're getting rid of the medical debt that they have. So that would be huge. And then going forward, medical expenses will be taken care of by our federal government. Medicare for All is going to be brought to the floor for a vote very soon, and then we're going to see, where our Democrat colleagues stand and where our Republicans stand on these issues, particularly as we deal with this pandemic. So Medicare for All, which is Jayapal's bill that she worked on with Bernie Sanders, is incredible, and it's going to be brought to the floor for a vote very soon, and then we'll see where people stand. But it deals with the issue of inequality in a major way, because health care costs are just so expensive, and that will no longer fall to people who require healthcare services.
Congressman, we've had a few people ask similar questions while you've been doing your presentation, and it's not as much as that people are opposed to some of the programs that you're talking about, but it's the cost of those programs and how we as a society are going to pay for them. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how these costs would be paid for so that they don't fall on the back of small business owners?
So we're a sovereign nation. We have a sovereign currency, and at the federal level, we have the power of the purse, and we can authorize spending in whatever area we choose to. When we look at the recent, tax breaks for the wealthy under the Trump administration, when we look at the New Deal investments, when we look at the Homestead Act, we gave away, the federal government invested in and authorized spending in housing, in land, in jobs, and in tax breaks. The federal government has a history of doing this to spur economic development. And that's what the federal government needs to do now, because as we've done it historically, we've left certain communities out while supporting the middle class and the wealth of other communities. So this is similar. We need to now invest in or authorize spending in communities that have been left out, so that our overall economic development, whether it's GDP or other areas, can grow. Again, when we all do better, we all do better. And it's time finally for the federal government to step in and do what's necessary there.
I want to shift to obviously the issue that's on everybody's mind as we look to reemerge. And before we can reemerge, obviously the vaccine and the implementation of the vaccine in New York State and in Westchester County is a priority for everyone. I know it's been only 29 days since you've been in Congress, but we'd like to hear your thoughts on how you think the vaccine rollout is going, if there are holes that need to be filled to make it a smoother process, especially for those folks who really either don't have access to the internet or are struggling just to try to make an appointment. Are you and your colleagues looking to give the Biden administration some on the ground feedback on what needs to be done?
So yes, I mean, we meet about this multiple times a week, not just the New York delegation, but the Democratic caucus as well. So I would give us maybe a C- for how we're rolling out the vaccine and getting it into the arms of people. The biggest issue is volume. We have not developed enough vaccines. Right now, New York State is getting somewhere around 300,000 a week. That is not nearly enough to meet the needs of the state. We need that to dramatically increase. So the volume is not where it needs to be. Some of that is obviously on Trump. A lot of it is actually on Trump because we didn't enact the Defense Production Act quickly enough. We didn't produce the volume quickly enough. So now we have this wait, not wait, but it's not going to roll out as quickly as it should. What I'm hearing is, by the summer we'll be okay, but with this pandemic raging and mutating, we need it a lot more quickly. So, we need more, and we need to make sure the infrastructures are in place in the state to get it to the most vulnerable communities. That has been held up somewhat because of the lack of volume. So that's where we are. But it's constant communication about it, constant pushing on Biden about it. He's aware. We just met with Dr. Fauci yesterday about this. So they're filling the gaps where Trump messed up, and we're hoping that, you know, we're able to ramp up production and get it to people as quickly as possible.
You know, one of the great things about being in public office is that you get to use your prior experience and share that with your colleagues. I remember when I was in the assembly and I represented the east side of Manhattan, I had no clue what dairy farmers were going through on a daily basis till one of my colleagues up from Rome, New York, took me on a 2-day tour of dairy farmers. And I began to understand a little bit more about what they are dealing with and some of the issues that in Albany we were either doing to not help them and issues that we need to do to help them. You're an educator. You spent your career in a classroom and in a school building. Can you tell us a little bit about your you know, what you want to start talking to not only your colleagues in your caucus, but in your colleagues from other parts of the country about what New York needs in terms of education?
So we have an inequitable, unequal system. You know, if you live in certain suburbs, your schools are funded sometimes at twice the rate than schools in American ghettos. You know, the Northeast Bronx housing projects, low-income communities, etc. That needs to change. You know, how we fund our schools needs to change. We need to fund schools based on need, not just based on property value. So that's a major component. The second component is early childhood education, which morphs into universal childcare. So the first 3 years of a child's life are so important. And the more we can provide nurturing environments during the first 3 years, or some say the first 1,000 days, it will help our children enter kindergarten ready to thrive in our school systems. The other thing is we need to bring more collaborative project-based learning into our schools. Right now, you know, the system is too siloed and piecemealed and not as interdisciplinary, collaborative, and project-based as it should be, because that's what's going to prepare you for a 21st century economy. So what we're doing with our tests, particularly in elementary school, is invalid and ineffective and isn't helping us to reach our goals. And then finally, you know, we call it, you know, I refer to as personal pathways to success. You know, we need to do a better job of putting our kids, once they get into a high school, on a pathway to success, whatever that pathway may be. Some kids are under enrolling in colleges because they don't believe they're Ivy League material when they are. Some kids are not looking at the 2-year college route. Some are not looking at the trade school route. There are just so many avenues that our kids could take, and we're not doing a good enough job of providing them with those avenues. So those are a few areas. Just align what we're doing in our schools with what we need in our community.
I'm going to stick with education, but we're going to bring obviously the impact that COVID is having on the education to this next question. In light of the new scientific evidence regarding COVID safety in schools, as an educator, how do we get teachers back into schools full time so our children can get back into the classroom in the best environment possible for learning?
You know, I need to look at that study to make sure it was peer reviewed, number one, and number two, to look at the environment in which it was studied and when it was studied, because I'm familiar with that study. But right now, we have more people dying per day from COVID than died during 9/11. So we are in a very tough spot. We have a mutating virus that we don't quite understand as of yet. So as much as I want everyone to go back to school safely, we are not ready to go back to school safely, especially when you consider the infrastructure in our schools. You know, 40% of our schools have crumbling infrastructure across the country. And if our schools don't have proper ventilation and aren't designed in alignment with net zero carbon emissions, they're not safe for kids to go in. This new virus remains airborne for longer periods of time than the initial virus. So we have to understand that. We have to really invest in restructuring our schools to be ready for people to go back safely. So I would argue that, you know, despite that research, I don't think that research took into account the mutating virus that we're dealing with right now. And as we know, this stuff is changing daily. what we can do, even especially as it gets warmer, hopefully it gets warmer sooner, we can use alternative spaces for learning. So learning doesn't have to happen in a traditional classroom. It can happen in parks, it can happen near waterways, it can happen near museums, it can happen in spaces that are closed. What we're going to need there, though, is more teachers and more tutors to give kids as much small group and one-on-one opportunities as possible so that they don't continue to miss out on structural learning opportunities.
We have time for about 2 more questions. I want to shift to another issue that has been a priority for the Business Council of Westchester, and that's the changing energy landscape that the county is going to face. As you know, the last reactor at Indian Point is closing in April. We still have the gas moratorium in the southern part of the county. 8 years ago, the Business Council commissioned an independent assessment white paper on what would happen if Indian Point were to close. And some of the findings that were raised in that paper had to do with obviously the reliability issue, the increase of electric rates, the environmental impact that it might cause with the carbon emissions, and obviously the economic impact it would cause by Indian Point closing. We use that assessment to say, okay, here's the reality. Let's make sure it never happens. Well, it is going to happen. And even though the Business Council of Westchester is all in on renewable energy as our future, our concern has always been, are we ready? Do we have the infrastructure built to support the renewable energy that we're going to need to power up this county and to keep businesses lights on? Are you concerned about what's going to happen come April when Indian Point closes? And again, are some of the work that you and your colleagues are thinking about to make sure that we're ready?
So, President Biden has committed $2 trillion to clean renewable energy, with 40% going to historically underserved communities. So we see that as the floor and not the ceiling, and we're really excited about that initial investment. I mentioned earlier about Transportation Infrastructure Committee investing in a huge infrastructure bill. This transition period is going to be part of that, right? Those who are used to working in previous energy sectors will now be a part of transitioning to a clean, renewable energy sector. The short answer to your question is, are we ready today? No, we are not. Can we get ready quickly? Yes, we can, if the federal government steps in and does its job, which we believe they will, because there's been so much organizing and fighting in that area. But we have to deal with the environmental injustices, that are taking place throughout the country. I mean, it's life or death, and it looks like Biden's ready to do that. We know that certain members of Congress are ready to do it, and the money is there. But we have to begin the technical assistance, the transition periods, the education, and to make sure as we go through this transition, people are still ready to earn their salary, take care of themselves, get retrained, and then enter a renewable energy economy. Again, this is our New Deal moment, so we have to respond accordingly.
Thank you, Congressman. Our last question, and we do have, and one of the things that the Business Council is so proud of is that we have over 140 non-for-profits as members. And one of, again, our missions is to remind stakeholders that non-for-profits are economic engines. They create jobs, they bring in revenue, as well as deliver the critical services that they deliver. We have a lot of non-for-profits joining us today. A few questions have come up about, what your feeling is on roles for non-for-profits and the non-for-profits within your district, how you're going to be beginning to work with them.
Well, I need to convene a meeting with the not-for-profits in the district so I could get a better understanding of who the not-for-profits are, what their needs are, and what areas they serve. Not-for-profits are essential to our overall economy, not just from the perspective of creating jobs and providing jobs, but providing key services to people throughout the district. So, as we develop an economy where we have zero unemployment and we deal with the issue of poverty and ending poverty, non-for-profits are a big part of that. So we're going to be convening a meeting with non-for-profits in the district so we can learn more about the needs and the gaps and the services that are provided to everyone.
Great, and I hope you'll use us as a resource because we can certainly connect you to that. Congressman, before I turn it over to Marcia to close out, let me thank you. The fact that we have had the opportunity on day 29 of your first term in office to be able to sit down and have this type of conversation with you, albeit not in person, I think is very important. Look, we are going to agree to disagree on many issues. But as you and I talked about right after your election, we need to have a strong line of communication. And the one thing that the Business Council of Westchester can provide to you and your staff is the opportunity to hear directly from businesses of all sizes, to learn what they're going through, but more importantly, hopefully to give suggestions to you that they really could use from Washington to continue to help them reemerge from this pandemic. So we look forward to a long working relationship with you. We'll be providing you with our 2021 legislative agenda in the next few weeks. That will be sent to both your DC office and your district office. So again, thank you for being here. I want to thank Sarah and your staff. They've been terrific to work with. And again, we wish you all the best. And I'm going to turn it over to Marcia to close out.
Thank you.
Thank you, John Ravitz. And thank you, Congressman Bowman. This has been very, very enlightening. The conversations that have happened in the chat room and the question and answers show that the business community is eager to continue to get to know you. This was a fabulous beginning. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your work. Thank you for everything you do and your concern for businesses and the community. John, did you have something
Just
else?
one last thing. We can tell the Congressman's staff is on the ball. In the chat room, the Congressman's put his email. So please make sure everyone takes that down because, again, this will be your opportunity to continue the dialogue with Congressman Bowman and his staff in the future.
Thank you. We thank KeyBank and John Manginelli and the entire KeyBank team for your support of this series. We remind everyone of the second half of the series next Thursday, and of course, our Diversity and Inclusion Conference on Friday. We wish everyone good health. Wear your mask. Stay socially distanced. We're getting there, everybody. And thank you, everyone, for your support of the Business Council of Westchester. Be healthy.